Hello, are you thinking of going on the continent this year and taking your car on a car ferry? Well, here's a little bit of information for you, but please don't get alarmed that a few years ago the Norway ferry operator Havila Kernsten banned all electric cars on their ferries. It sounds quite alarming and a little bit ironic considering that Norway has more electric cars per person than any other country. But it was on a ship that was primarily a passenger carrier. They only took a handful of electric cars, and its competitors carried on as normal and really couldn't see what all the fuss was about. But there was a lot of fuss a couple of years ago because when electric vehicles caught fire, there was a lot of press interest. In fact, there was a lot of press interest when anything with four wheels caught fire. It was initially blamed on being an electric vehicle, and that wasn't necessarily the case. In fact, it was hardly ever the case. Hello folks, I'm Nigel. Hope you can subscribe and like. Please leave any comments down below, and if you're thinking of buying a Tesla, leave me a link below and you can get £500 off or $500 depending where else you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining me today. Really do appreciate all the new subscribers. 1,800 of you. Wow, it's huge. We'll soon be catching up Mr. Beast. The true story was, of course, that some ferry companies did stop banning the charging of EVs on ferries, something that I've never actually done. This was all new to me. But the headlines would read EVs banned on ferries, and you'd read it and you would read that they're actually not allowed to charge their EV, which is really not an issue. Now recently there's been a report out that EVs are less likely to burst into flames, because the common perception with a lot of people is that our cars burst into flames on average about every 15 minutes, which is certainly not the case. An EV is much less likely to burst into flames than a petrol diesel car. A hybrid is much more likely to burst into flames than a petrol or a diesel car. So the report out saying that an EV is much less likely to be a danger bursting into flames if it's at 30% or below charge was something that maybe some operators are thinking of implementing. I haven't seen it anywhere in my travels, and I've been on quite a few. I'm not so sure that it's necessary, haven't seen any evidence that it is, but please leave any details below if you've come across this with any ferry operators. I've looked and done some research but can't find it anywhere. I did think about the title of this, EVs banned on car ferries, but that's clickbait and that's not true. Yes, they were banned a few years ago. Now, a well-known YouTuber, let me give you a few clues. He drives a Porsche Taycan. He thinks it's all a government conspiracy. He loves Blackpool, loves fish and chips. Well, I do also. Tenerife. He recently had a title of a thumbnail, quite recently. He was banned from taking his EV to Europe on the ferry. And I watched the video and there was not even any mention of any ferries and any banning. So it is a subject of absolute clickbait. Now I know I would have got 10 times more views if I had said that I was banned from going to Europe or EVs are banned on ferries, but it really is not the case. So I've been on quite a few ferries. Isle of Wight ferry, the ferry from Southampton to Santander. Now I believe they didn't at the time because it was a few years ago, they now give you a marker. So I don't know if it's a blue dot or something, piece of paper you hang over the reversing mirror, and I believe they now do that. Now we did that a few years ago and then drove down to Porto in Portugal and then down to the Algarve and had a wonderful times. Lots of Tesla superchargers starting out in Santander. I believe they've got a new one now, and all the way down through northern Spain down to Portugal. Had a wonderful time. Beach is wonderful. We went in January, came back February, had a great time. The sea there isn't really warm enough to swim in if you compare it to the Canaries, where we went in every day. Didn't take the car there. I do know of a lot of people who do drive now down to Portugal and down to Spain. The superchargers are great, mostly in great places where you can get coffee, tea, something to eat. In most cases, a few not so good, but it's the same here. We have some superchargers in great locations, they're in motorway services. Some are in shopping centres that sort of closed down and are not available 24 hours a day. If you're thinking of going down to Santander, Bilbao, from Plymouth, Southampton, Portsmouth, I thoroughly recommend it. I think I may have said earlier we went from Southampton to Santander. I think it was Portsmouth. Yeah.
The government.
Anywho, Southampton is more the ocean liners, isn't it? Now, another ferry that I've been on quite a few times is to Orkney, and I have to say that Orkney is a real treat of a place if you haven't been there before. As a rule, Brits tend to go south where it's just a little bit warmer, and I quite understand that. And going up to Scotland, the north of Scotland, do you know what? There's only a couple of degrees difference in temperature, and what you do get is a lot less people. So if you're thinking of heading up to Scotland and you go up to Aberdeen, there's a ferry from Aberdeen to Kirkwall, and if you want to, you can keep going on up to even further than that, to Shetland and Lerwick. And the people are lovely, very friendly, and in Orkney there's lots of other smaller islands. So now there is another ferry you can take, because that's the overnight ferry from Aberdeen to Kirkwall. If you keep driving, it's a bit more driving, but you go past Inverness and then probably another 2.5 hours close to Land's End, and it's Gills Bay. There's a ferry that takes about an hour to go to St Mary's Hope on the island of Orkney, and then it's a 20-minute drive to Kirkwall. Lots of hotels, Airbnb, and it's a lovely place, and there's a lot less people. Everyone's very friendly. Now, there's also lots of little islands dotted around north of the mainland, which they call the main island. And there's Sanday and Stronsay, Westray, Edy, and these smaller islands have ferries. They take about 2 hours, and very reasonable if you compare it to the Isle of Wight price of going, which is about £100 or more each way. These are in the region of £20-30 and are very reasonable. And if you choose a day that's not too rough, you can also take a bike. These islands are great to visit on a bike, as I used to do, or take the car and explore. A lot of the islands, people wave to you if you're in a car, or if they're in the garden and you're on your bike, and it's a wonderful place to visit. And all these islands are very welcoming. The ferries are really quite small compared to what you may be used to. They tend to remind me of some of the ferries the Isle of Wight had back in the 60s, in the many years ago when I was a lad. And another thing that reminds me of the 60s is you can always also from Kirkwall fly to the small Northern Isle, so recommended if you don't fancy the 2-hour ferry crossing to some of the Northern Isles. There are planes that only take 5-10 minutes. The old Islander built on the Isle of Wight. Now the locals only pay £9.50, but you'll pay a little bit more. I think it's in the region of about £35-40, and a great way also to visit the islands. And there are now Airbnbs popping up all over the place, and it's a holiday if you want peace and quiet. It's quite unique, some of these islands. They're fantastic. Skara Brae is absolutely amazing. It's older than the pyramids. Only reason it exists is because it was covered over by sand, and everything is made of stone, and of course stone lasts and wood doesn't, and it's quite wonderful. Charge Place Scotland is a great card to get, and they're very reasonable prices, 25-35p kilowatt hour, and there are still available in some hotels you can go to, some bars you can go to, some distilleries you can go to, and you can get free charging. The Scottish are very friendly people. Thanks very much for joining me today. Hope you can subscribe and like. See you next time. Bye for now.